Hi, Elevate. Welcome to today's closing keynote, Stories from Survivor Island, How Two Nonprofit Leaders Adjusted During Crisis. I'm Gene Moses, a certified nonprofit professional and your Director of Product at the Alliance. Before we kick off today's session, I want to note that we plan on having a Q&A session at the end if time allows. If you have any questions during the presentation, place them into the chat and our panelists will try to address them at the end. Now, I'm thrilled to call to the floor today's presenters, Susan Tomlinson-Schmidt, President of the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance, Angela Lamb, Human Resources Director at Leith, and Terrence Narcissus, East Harris County Empowerment Council. Please take it away.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you, Jean, for your lovely introduction. I want to just pause for 1 second before we get into the meat of our discussion here and acknowledge that there's a crisis brewing in Eastern Europe. And I think it's important as change makers in our society to just be aware of all these issues that will arise, to keep in mind and on our hearts, our colleagues who will be called to action to respond to such a crisis, whether it's refugee resettlement or humanitarian aid on the ground. Any kind of conflict like this really calls our sector to respond. So I don't want to sweep that under the rug. I want to just make sure that we're all cognizant of how our sector, once again, is so critical to our society, to our global society. So I doubt you'd have trouble finding information about this conflict, but we did post a link in the feed on the front page of Elevate to the United Nations news feeds where you can learn more. So unfortunately, we're going to continue with the theme of crisis today, but the one that's closer to our homes and hearts, the ones that the crisis sees, unfortunately, plural, that we've been experiencing in our own home communities over the last couple of years. So as Jean said, I'm Susan Tomlinson-Schmidt. I'm president of the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. I was a CMP before I was president, so I've walked in your shoes. And when our staff asked me to prepare a keynote for Elevate, I did what I always do, which is just sit and think a minute about what I'm thinking about, what I want to talk about, and hopefully it's reflective of many of you and what you're thinking about. So the word that came to my mind was survival, which I feel like we've all been doing in so many ways, personal and professional, over the last couple of years. So I knew in our network, we have some of the most talented, qualified leaders in the sector. So it seems to me the right conversation to have is, what have you been doing? How have you been surviving? I will admit I've never seen Survivor Island either. I'm not a Survivor fanatic, but people in my network tell me it's appropriate that I didn't get the terminology wrong. So yes, we're going to talk about the upside even of survival too. This won't be just whining. We're not going to have a whine session. So again, I was thinking about who's in our network that could help us learn and pull this all together. And both Terrence and Angela are CMPs who are working out in the field that I know well. So the reason I asked them both is I also know that they will not be shy, that what we can do is talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the truth about real honest conversation about what's been working, what hasn't, how do we move forward, what's next. So I guess that's an auspicious reason to be asked to be on a panel, Terrence and Angela. But that is why I ask you here, because I know you'll really have a vibrant conversation with me, and I will promise to do the same, share the truth. So I'm going to let Angela start and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work. Angela, just because you have the letter A, that no other reason, you can go first. So let's start with you.
Thank you so much. As Jean and Susan said, I'm Angela Lamb. I'm the HR director for Porter Leith, which is located in Memphis, Tennessee. We are an early childhood education focused organization with a couple of smaller caveats. Our mission is to empower children and families to live a healthy lifestyle and to meet them where they're at. So whatever they define as healthy lifestyle, we're there to support that. Port Leith is actually the oldest nonprofit in Memphis. We are older than our local nonprofit cemetery by a couple of years. We've been here through the yellow fever, through the Great Depression, through World War II, and now through COVID. So we are thriving, and we look to have another 170 years ahead of us. I've been with the organization 3.5 years at this point in this role, and I have learned a lot in this position, and I have a ton more to learn. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm excited about this next hour.
I think you really put that in context, Angela. Yellow fever, depression. I mean, it's this significant. So thank you for being here with us. And Terrence, tell us about East Harris County Empowerment Council.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Terrence Narcissus, as Susan said, with East Harris County Empowerment Council. We are based in Houston, Texas. I am also a CMP, and I certified in 2011, and I cannot believe that's been 11 years ago. Time flies when you are living
I'm not going
good.
to tell you how old my CMP is then.
Likewise.
And I got into the program back when it was called American Humanics. And so it was under a different name, different vision. And I'm excited to be here today to share with you all my experience. I am the CEO and founder of East Harris County Empowerment Council. We are a regional community development organization that services unincorporated Harris County. That means that our communities that we serve are outside of a city jurisdiction. So essentially we don't have a mayor. Everything that happens in our area falls to the feet of our local government, our county. And so we exist to provide, or to improve, the quality of life for residents who reside in East Harris County, to help them reach their full potential. Went to University of Houston, had a great experience, got to meet Susan while planning or being on an AMI committee to talk about all the amazing things that AMI and the NLA program afforded me to do. And I was also a Next Gen intern when they had $4,500 internship stipends for students coming through the program.
Now you're just going to make everybody jealous. That grant ran out. So sorry for our CMP students here. Yeah, AMI is our annual face-to-face conference. And so Elevate is the virtual counterpart to that, just for those of you who don't know. Okay, let's get right to it. So when everything started breaking loose and it was clear we were going to have to shift quickly, I was wondering what you really prioritized. So I will share with you, Angela as HR runs a big team. And so hopefully she can share the internal perspective of shifting. And then Terrence's outreach to the neighborhood was greatly impacted. So hopefully, Angela, talk to us about what you were prioritizing as you were thinking about your staff and program continuation.
Well, as I said, we focus on early childhood education, which means 6 weeks old, all the way up until we're ready for kindergarten. So our number one priority were those kids. Just because COVID wasn't allowing us to come into the classrooms and in the buildings didn't mean the kids didn't need an education. So we had to quickly turn on a dime. And we got notice on Monday, the March 16th, we all came into work, and then all of a sudden it was, all right, pack up, get out of here, go home, take your stuff. We're going to work from home the next couple of days.
Yeah.
And so we spent that week planning, how are we going to do this? What's going to happen if we can't come back into our classrooms? And so all the schools were on break, COVID break, I guess, for that week. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, no one's going back anywhere for a while. So we then had to quickly help our teachers transition to teaching online. And if any of you have ever spent any time with a toddler in person, imagine trying to wrangle that online. So parents had to be more engaged, because they had to sit with, make sure that the toddler was actually sitting in front of the screen and somewhat paying attention. And we have some teachers who they're hands-on. They don't do well with teaching online. They're not a modern teacher, if you will. So they had to be forced into a whole new way of life. The fun part about that is that before COVID, we were a desktop computer kind of company. And so we had to wrangle up
Ooh,
a lot of laptops that we could. My team alone, HR has 18 Chromebooks that we use in orientation for people to do their onboarding, their enrollment, etc. So HR was like, okay, we got 18 we can loan out.
yeah.
But we were scrambling to make that happen. At the time, we were also partnering with the local school district so the children were at least taken care of, because the school district gave iPads and
Okay.
Chromebooks out to all the kids. But it was a interesting learning experience, which I'm somewhat thankful for, in the sense that it's made us stronger and able to teach outside of the normal classroom setting.
So when it first happened, did you know who was essential? Had you ever even thought about your workforce in terms of who's essential and who's not?
As the HR director, all of you are essential. So
Yeah, I guess that's true.
regardless of the position. And we pretty much have, everyone is essential, because you have your cooks who you have to prepare the children's food. You have the teachers, obviously. You have the custodians that have to make sure our buildings stay clean for the children. So if you're going to go essential versus non-essential, the non-essential staff would probably be the admin team.
Right, for sure.
But then we have to be there to support the essential staff.
And especially as they start dropping like flies with COVID and you're having to fill in.
Yes.
Very good. So you kept the client as the priority, and that helped you pivot quickly.
Absolutely.
So what about you, Terrence?
So for us, COVID was another wave or another wrinkle in our shirt or tablecloth tapestry, if you will. Houston, for those of you know, we had Hurricane Harvey in 2017. We've had constant flooding, years after that. Then we had our winter freeze last February, where our state's power grid shut down, and 246 people lost their lives in last year, which was in 2021. 2020 was COVID. So we have been surviving, and now we've learned to use the term resilience and begin thinking about how do we rethink about the way that as nonprofits we operate. When we can't do what we have always known to do or been accustomed to do or believe that we had to do, when the stakes are high and you have to pivot, what does that cause you to think? And like Angela mentioned, it's generally speaking, it's all or nothing, because for us, we don't even call it the people that we serve clients. We call them neighbors, because we're in the community. And so really using empowering language to describe the work that we do, and not being exploitive or extractive, but looking at from an asset-based model and framework of thinking about, well, what's the good that's actually happening in the community. And so through all of these storms, I mean, for Harvey alone, Houston literally was underwater. I'm sure most of you may have heard about that experience. I've never seen that much water. It literally rained for 5 days, and I've never had an experience like that before in my life. And in my community, since we don't have the local government, I kind of became the switchboard. I was on the call with elected officials, with the school districts, with churches, with community organizations and other stakeholders, bringing people together as I'm in school getting an MBA. This is all volunteer work. We didn't go full-time operational until the spring of 2018, and the organization was founded 10 years earlier. So we did work for 10 years and never got a paycheck. It was never supposed to be this big. It was just an idea of, hey, how can we impact the world, but really get the people that live in our community access to resources and opportunity. That's all we wanted. If it's on the west side of Houston, can we get it over here? If it's on the north side, can we get it over here? And so bringing people together using a systems approach of thinking about how do we organize and align ourselves collectively to then go out and to solve those problems. After Harvey, I remember, being on conference calls where we had a national donor that gave us 18-wheelers of product, 50. No staff. We had to mobilize the community like never before to set up all kinds of systems, forms, technologies, privacy, processes. I mean, it just the list goes on when you're starting everything from scratch because we didn't have a blueprint. We've never been here before. And so we took all the lessons that we learned from Harvey and then we kept applying them to the floods, applied them to COVID, and now we're applying them to the winter storm of thinking about how do we engage people when we can't be in their face? How can we leverage the power of social media to recruit people? How can we take Miss Mary, who may be the little old lady on the corner that's she knows her whole street. And people, oh, she's an old lady, what can she do? But she can cook. So we can take her pies, the grocery store down the street or the convenience store. Hey, can you give us cases of water? As opposed to thinking about what the monumental task was, we divided and conquered and thought about how in the world can we use everyone in the community to get them on our side to go after this common problem. Because again, when the water's coming up in your home, it doesn't matter who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, who's a this, who's a that. It only matters that, human safety, public safety, that's really what this process was about. So how do we mobilize people who have been considered low income, minority? So how do we take those terms and say, okay, well, maybe they may be low income, but that may be because they're in an under-resourced community or a low opportunity community or a high need population. So how do we begin to reframe all these things and think about people from the lens of how can we best serve people for people's sake, to put ourselves last, put people first. Like Angela said, put the people that you're seeking to serve, remembering your mission of why are we here to do what we do. If the Wi-Fi goes out, the passion is still there to serve. If the lights goes out, you're still there to serve. The phones don't work. If your building burns down, again, so moving from a survival mindset to say, how do we build resilience? And 9 times out of 10, what we found in our community, well, 10 times out of 9 was that, hell, people were already resilient.
Yeah.
They just were never given, they were just never told that they were resilient. So, you have grandparents that are using the plastic fork for 10 years or the piece of a foil or the birthday card and taking all these things that they've been given and holding on to this or the old jackets or the hand-me-down. That's the biggest thing the biggest lesson for us was thinking about how do we tell the story, because we actually had a funder call and Terrence, how are you all building resiliency in your community? I said, well, the people in the community can come teach a class on how they have become resilient because we have this whole idea of people can't be more than because they have less income, because some kind of way we got it to twist it to where we're believing people have value based on the amount of money that they have in their pockets as opposed to how they can step up to help their community in times of struggle.
I love it. So they may be low on resources, but what you've leveraged is they're rich on social capital. And that's really a key to your work. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you here, I swear you've been in crisis management mode since the day you opened. And it's just mind blowing, right? I don't know. It's just mind blowing to me that East Harris County has had so much happen since you set up shop. So
yeah, and I was
crisis after crisis.
I was the first employee of the organization, started on March 1st, 2018. And today we had a staff meeting and there were 16 of us.
Yeah, you've grown a real, because there was such a need. I mean, you're really talking about a disenfranchised group of people who were not accessing the services because because they weren't a squeaky wheel. They were in little, kinship circles, not finding the bigger voice. And so you've elevated that, and that's beautiful. And certainly shifting, each crisis has been a little something different. So what you needed to respond and all of that has changed. So talk to me a little bit about when you started making these shifts. Did you have the skills on staff that you needed? Did you have to go find outsource something. Angela, you talked about technology. There were certainly capital expenses we all had to make to shift. What were some of the skills, knowledge, what'd you have to go find? Where'd you find it?
So I think our biggest gap was our teachers not being tech savvy.
Yeah.
And that one was hard. However, we have a department called Teachers Excellence Program, and they are here to make our current teachers even better. And so that team dispersed and met teachers where they were and helped them through the process, helped them learn Zoom very quickly. We also have a group of teachers that are called relief teachers under the TEP program, and they are designed to go in and do the same thing on a one-on-one basis. Our instructional coaches kind of teach classes on it.
Oh.
So we have our one-on-one.
So is that an internal unit? TEP is internal to Porter Leith. Okay.
It's been around since 2018, I believe, and is going very strong. We've just expanded it a little bit. And then our IT team, they had to gather all the supplies and hunt down some laptops, and they were meeting people at their homes to help them set them up.
Oh yeah.
The staff who weren't comfortable plugging in and getting Wi-Fi, that was another hurdle for us. Is we have some staff who they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have internet at home, and so we had to help them with that. Again, the school district at the time that we were partnering with had lots of supplies, so we were able to set people up. We were able to get them connected. I think out of the entire workforce, we had 2 people that just absolutely could not do what we needed them to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we found them something else to do at the time.
Redeployed them. That's great.
Mm-hmm. On the flip side, our teachers also had some fewer children. We had some parents who didn't want their children to learn virtually because it was also hard for the parent, because parents typically are going to work at the same time the children are going to school. So it was hard for a parent to get their work done while being engaged with their child being in school.
Do you know what your head count drop was?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. It wasn't drastic, but it was noticeable.
Yeah.
We did set up a new schedule. So they ended up, and this was we had to make a couple of changes, but they would allow parents to sign their children up for either morning school or afternoon school. And then on the flip side, whatever you didn't choose, we encouraged playtime and interactive time on the opposite side. So the kids would still get, children. I've been slapped on the hand a couple times for saying kids. But the children would get their 6 hours of learning time. It just looked a little bit different depending on the parent schedule.
Okay, so you got some technology supports, but really you leveraged internal resources to get everybody up to speed. Mm-hmm. So you're lucky. And you have a huge staff. So that's one of the reasons you can do that.
Yes.
So Terrence, what about you? Did you have to go find something you didn't have that you needed?
Absolutely. On the day that we got the go home, work safe order, we had literally we were getting ready to launch our financial assistance program for the tropical storm that came through Houston and had a flood 6 months earlier. And so they said, our funder called, press pause, can we use you in another capacity for COVID? And we were like, well, what are you talking about? We think this may be something, if we decide to raise funds, can you deploy resources into your community? And I'm thinking, okay, fine. The first time I had heard about COVID was in February, it was Black History Month. And I had a meeting with our local health department to kind of introduce our work and things like that. And a lot of the directors were going to be in the meeting with me, and the meeting got canned. And I'm sitting in the lobby, like, and people are just like rushing, running around, rushing around. I'm like, well, what is going on? And they're like, oh, this thing in China, it's called COVID. And I'm kind of like, oh, well, and I'm thinking like, well, we've been through H1N1, SARS, bird flu, avian, all those different flus, and I'm like, well, is that going to come here? And they're like, oh no, it'll all be fine. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Well, we're monitoring the situation and yada yada yada. And I'm like, oh well, I remember with Ebola, not many people died. They took care of it. It's America. You know, hey,
We
we're
all,
smart enough to figure this out.
yeah.
Looking back, God help us all. um, and so through the pandemic, what we had to quickly realize, because what opportunities started to come our way that was not there before. But because we had responded to other disasters, we had a good understanding of Google Meets, Zoom was kind of the thing. We did not have, headsets like what I'm wearing right now, or like we really didn't have the systems that integrated with each other that allowed us to serve people efficiently. So we had to invest in even bringing on, as a contractor, a software developer to help us think through all of these pieces of how does the phone system integrate with our CRM? How does the CRM integrate with our website? If people are going to apply for any kind of assistance, it was no longer about using Google Forms. So thinking about going from something that's, free and readily available, but how do you pivot that to move to something that's much more secure, to where you can actually have the logic behind the questions? If you rent your home, all these questions would then pop up. Or if you have, you know, if you are a senior citizen, senior citizens are not going to go to our website and complete our form. So I had to deputize my mom and the Real Housewives of East Harris County to go and help our senior citizens complete our application, because essentially the county came and said, "Hey, we're going to release $30 million for COVID assistance." This was back in early 2020, around the summer time, and we want you all to be a part of that. And I'm thinking, we've never had this much money before in our lives. How
Yeah.
are we going to do this? And we had to sit down and think about the policies, the processes, the safeguards, the internal controls, and also working with a credit union partner, because again, everything that we do is hyper local. We knew that our name was not that well established in our community to that degree. Like, you wouldn't see us on a billboard. We were not a household name yet at that point. And so we had to think about, well, if that's when, Houston is hot for human trafficking. That was when the white van deal was going around town, of people being picked up from places and then, dragged out in a white van, and they take them down the freeway and do bad things to them. And so the scams, the social security scams, there's a lot that was happening during that time. And so we had to think about, what is a way that's going to empower people. And so we got a $1.5 million grant to distribute 90% of that to the community. And so it was like, okay, well, gift cards, checks, what is the best way? And so think about all of these tax implications, vendor signing, it was a whole new world that we had to organize and bring in people from our community who were subject matter experts on how to get this done. So as opposed to us having a huge raise on capital in terms of staff and time, it just took a lot of meetings of thinking about, here are the processes that we want this to be. When people come in, it has to be simple as possible. Here's how we're going to answer the phone. Here's a call script. Here's this piece, here's that, and giving people things of saying, here's how this process is going to look. Because at that point, it came down to customer service and also quality. Because we knew that people were already in vulnerable situations. Like Angela said, they're nerved up, they're not sure what's going on. The kids had been home for spring break, and now they're back, over here doing this, and we can't go outside, and you can't go to the grocery store, and we're not sure. Every time we turn around, someone's happening a COVID outbreak over here, or the hospitals are saying this, to where we actually ended up partnering with a credit union. And so we actually had to open up a bank account. We put all the money in that account, and then they also had their branded debit cards.
Oh.
And so we were able to get, they gave us all the gift cards free of charge, and we set up in their lobby every Saturday for about 10 weeks. And the community volunteers again showed up to help us distribute funds. And we got through a $1.5 million project in less than 50 days.
Wow. Now, did you already know the credit union? Were they already partners of yours?
Yes, so they were, they have 5 branches all across. And so we began thinking about, if people are going to come get assistance, they may feel shame. They may not, be in a good mental headspace to receive assistance. They can't go to the church or to the community center. This is much different because in our community, this has never happened before.
Right.
And so, well, if someone's going to give you money, the bank. Well, no one knows if you need assistance or don't, because it's the bank. So everyone's going to the bank. You usually have business to take care of at the bank. And so that whole shame came off. And so we had this, the police officers outside, we had, music, we had people appointment times, because through our little system, we could book, Angela Lamb, 9:15, Susan Tomlinson, 9:30. And then when they came in, we checked them in on an iPad, asked them, did they have their driver's license? They walked up to the table. Hi, my name is this person. Here's my driver's license. Okay, well, here's your gift card. And they signed out on the iPad that, hey, I picked up my stuff. Well, here's a bag to learn more about our organization. And here's some other resources that you may need for you and your family, and maybe keep in touch. And so after that, they got their stuff, and it took less than 15 minutes for people to come in and get assistance. It was no hassle. And I remember getting a call from one of our elected officials' office saying people thought that this was a scam because it was too easy to get money. But we took away all of the, all of the process. Hey, when you fill out the form, we had phone support. Hey, well, here's what's wrong with your application. Here's why we can't approve it. We had chat support. We had video support. And then we had my mom and her crew out in the community, working with the senior groups to get those seniors, to get their cable bill as a proof of residency, to get their driver's license, to get their, their Medicaid or their forms that we needed to verify that they are who they say they were. And then as the people can come in, like, oh my God, Miss Jackson, it's me. And, I'm Mary. You talked to me on the phone, and they're bringing cakes and cookies and pies. And so I'm like, well, what is going on? And so I remember, she's like, well, this is my son. This is his organization. And she's looked at me and she just burst into tears. And I was like, okay, well, this is kind of, for me, this is kind of weird. And my mom's like, well, what's going on? She's like, this is the money that I'm going to use to stop my house from going into foreclosure. And so when you think about out of 875 people that we were able to help, just that one that we were able to help her save her home, the whole project was worth it.
Yeah.
And so taking those lessons learned of, bringing in the technology to making sure the systems, everything is integrating to make sure that you have the right implementation partner for your staff. Because again, and our volunteers. So our volunteers had to depend on the staff to go through and screen all of the people for, to make sure that they were actually legit who they say they were. And then on the weekend, that's how we kept that internal control, because no one side had more power than the other to distribute the resources to the community. And then from that, we got thousands of people signed up on our newsletter. And so we were able to really to begin those relationships and then bring in other partners based on the form that they filled out. Hey, I need a job. Hey, I need this, to bring the right partners to the table, to where as COVID continued on, we knew more information than our local school districts.
Sure.
What do you mean what do you mean that you don't know how many of your kids don't have Wi-Fi at home, or they don't have devices to learn on? But that's information that we knew, that we can say 70% of the kids in your district don't have this. And so how can we then work together to collectively solve that problem? But what it just came down to was COVID caught a bunch of organizations who were used to doing business a certain kind of way off guard, because they didn't even know which questions to ask. Where we put ourselves at the center of it, of, if you are this person needing assistance, what is something that you may need to be asked that can then allow someone to help you over the next couple of years?
Well, you had such experience with that, and I think that just served you well. And I think your story, really emphasizes something that I want us all to take away. There were organizations in our communities who saw great spikes of resources. So you got a grant like you'd never been given before. And, I think coming out of it, we've got to understand what it is, what skills, what processes, what documentation to help people respond to the next crisis, to make sure that money's used wisely. So I heard you both say a couple of things. Quality, there was an emphasis on quality for both of you. So we're not just going to serve, we're going to make sure we're still serving at a high quality experience for our clients. And then new relationships. We know a lot of nonprofit organizations did not take advantage of some of the CARES Act supports, particularly PPP loans, because they didn't have banking relationships. They didn't have capacity on staff. So there were like 1.4 million PPP loans made, and only 3% of those went to 501c3 organizations. So very underutilized tool. We also know there were so many jobs lost in the sector. So nonprofits needed those loans, right? But just didn't access them. So I think this thinking through the skills you need, the relationships you need before the crisis happens.
That is so critical. It is not helpful to, when you're in a natural disaster, to be passing out business cards for the first time. Yes. Hi, my name is, I didn't know. So we started to mobilize people before the crisis hit to have friends everywhere, high places, low places, no experience that we have had to date has been wasted because of, like Susan said, everything that kind of like your collegiate experience and your journey through NLA. Everything builds on the competencies that you need to become a certified professional to literally change the world. It's not like, well, I don't necessarily need volunteer management. I don't need fundraising.
Maybe not today.
Everything builds upon that. And I remember sitting in class, the fundraising class at University of Houston, thinking, I'm never going to need this. But it was through that class that I actually said, well, this is where the money is. And so if you could learn where the money is, there's strategy there. And that's how I fell in love with learning to raise money. It's all about salesmanship, relationships, listening, bringing people to the table to listen and find out, well, what's the actual problem that we're trying to solve, and how can the resources that you have, who you've done well, have a lot of resources, but we've done well, and we know our community and how to solve and meet those needs from an immediate impact or from an investment impact of, hey, this may be a 3-year project. We both come together as partners and equals to say, what is the change that we desire to see in the world, and how can we work together to get there?
I love how you put it. It's too late to be handing out your business cards when the crisis hits. You got to have those relationships ahead of time. So, Angela, so you've been through it. You've survived. You're moving back to thriving. How'd you do? How do you think you did, Porter Leith?
I think we did amazing compared to quite a few of the other nonprofits just in the Memphis Shelby County area. I'd say we didn't miss a beat.
Yeah. So what are you going to do now to prepare for the next one?
Well, hopefully there won't be a next one, but
I think we can count on that.
Yeah, unfortunately. We now have a new plan in place. We've always had a disaster plan in place to, whether it be flooding or tornado or whatnot, ice storm, we get those periodically. We've now added virus to our plan and what happens if we are shut down again. I think we learned a lot from this. I think if this were to happen again, we now have the resources that it's a matter of, okay, let's refresh everyone's memory. Remember what we did back in 2020, and then move forward. We have a new outlook from staffing as far as flexibility. And so staff have gotten very used to being able to work outside of their office, their cubicle, their classroom. Now, our preference is that, we teach in a classroom just so because you can hold attention better. We feel like the children would learn better there, but I think we're good. We're going to survive if it happens again. I mean, like I said at the beginning, we've survived the Great Depression, the Yellow Fever, World War II. So it's like, bring it, we're ready.
Bring it. Well, I think flexibility is the key, right? We're going to hire with that in every job description from now on. You may be asked to flex, right?
Absolutely.
We can't guarantee you this job is always going to look exactly like what we're hiring you for. So that's a great, I think we got to be really upfront about that with our staff. So good takeaway. What about you, Terrence? Are you doing anything different? I said you've been in crisis response mode since the day you started. So, but what'd you learn? What are you going to do differently?
We learn, we do, we evaluate and listen, and then we share. So this is a part of the sharing of what our experience was like. Never stop learning. Always be humble and be upfront about what you don't know. But also as young people and as professionals, as Susan and Angela both mentioned, we have to be prepared. Well, what does prepared look like? Continuous professional development.
Yeah.
Many local libraries, first of all, get on LinkedIn, establish yourself in a profile as a professional on LinkedIn. A lot of opportunities are happening on LinkedIn. You may find your next employer on LinkedIn. Another volunteer opportunity could be there. Volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. Go and be involved in the organizations that you have a desire to be a part of or to work for. I cannot tell you how many times I've volunteered at a golf tournament just thinking that I'm hanging out, passing out, water or soda or towels or
Yeah,
beer or anything
water.
like that.
That's what they pass out at golf
And
tournaments.
okay, water. you know, he turned, yeah, water. So liquids, the beverage cart, to meet people who are at different companies that want to learn more about how they can impact the world. And so that sparks a conversation. Using your network, getting with your peers, attending events like this right here, but also looking at LinkedIn Learning. So LinkedIn Learning bought out, I think, lynda.com. I think it's called Lynda.
Right.
And in Harris County, if you have a Harris County public library card, they actually pay for LinkedIn Learning for free for
Oh,
all
that's
of other people.
wonderful.
And so we get a $30 a month free subscription by library card holders. And so that's our professional development as an organization. You get access to 16,000 courses for free. It's free. Your
Yeah.
university may pay for it. Get on there, learn project management. I cannot stress project management enough. That is one skill that the sector is going to have to invest in. I am not telling you to go get a PMP or a C or any of that kind of stuff, but understand the fundamentals of how to put together a project and how to work well with other people, to humble ourselves, to again think about what we don't know, but also understand the power and the value that you all are bringing to the sector. I came into the sector 10 years ago. I remember to this day coming home to tell my parents I want to work in nonprofit, and my dad looked at me with the look of horror. Well, son, that means no money. And I said, well, if it's no money, then how are all these people at the Red Cross and other major organizations able to do all that they do? Never in a million years did I think that anyone would call me CEO of anything. That was not the goal. It was just to help my community. But through that passion and that, I found my purpose and my calling to be called to where now I'm literally able to sit on the phone and on Zoom meetings and be able to share the experience that I have that I really discredited because I didn't think that I had the title or our budget size or just thinking about less than, but also think about, well, why are people calling me? They're not calling me because what I don't have, they're calling me because of what I'm able to bring to the table. And when
Nice.
you don't get invited to those tables, build your own table. The
Yeah.
world is literally yours for the taking. Surround yourselves with people who can invest in your dream, but also be humble enough to know that we are all here to help each other succeed. That is the only way that we get through all of this. Today it's a pandemic. It's been floods, ice storms, wildfires in California, climate change. The issues and are so complex. Public education. Find, again, like my mom told me one day, find your passion and let it kill you.
Oh, well, you're full of them, aren't you? We could write all kinds of T-shirts after from Terrence sayings. Okay, so I got to step back because you said so much there, but yes, it is about passion. It is about professional development. I think this is a critical issue that we're trying to lift up with the loss of over 1 million jobs in the sector. What we know is the people who are left working here doing this work have got to do more with less. And one of the only ways we can do that is to build our teams and invest in ourselves. And when we're in crisis response modes, it's very easy to put that aside and say there's not time to learn more about this topic. Couldn't agree more that project management is some of what I do the most of in a leadership role, is just managing my teams who are fulfilling our mission through these programs and projects. So along the professional development, I will lift up that Leaderosity has tons of great professional development as well as LinkedIn Learning. I'm a fan of that too, but we do have some of that on there. So I totally agree with you. I think it is such a critical time that our the talent in our sector is needed more than ever before. I think we've all had conversations with our parents who say, you're going to do what? Or a guidance counselor who says, oh, you're too smart to do that, So we have to put all that aside and know that we're building something bigger than what they see, for sure. Okay, I want to take some questions. We'll take a couple of questions, and then I have a final question for Angela and Terrence to share their thoughts on. But did any questions pop up in the thread?
I don't believe I've seen any questions pop up just yet, but if any do, then we can allow you to ask questions. Anybody have a question?
I'll throw up one. Staff morale, we heard so much about it while people are thinking about their questions. Can you give me something fun that you did to help staff morale while you were rolling out this shift?
Well, we encouraged, I'm part of the leadership team, and we encouraged each manager to create something themselves. We didn't want to box them in if it wasn't their style. And speaking personally, we had daily check-ins on Google Chat, and each person was responsible for bringing a bad joke to the conversation. I mailed my team a couple of care packages throughout the pandemic while we were still work from home. We had a couple of, each site had a couple of online parties. And so we'd meet at 4:00. Everyone would bring their favorite water, and we would just sit back and talk about how it's been going, and what do you have planned for the weekend? Nothing, ha ha ha. And so
you let me pretty team directed. I like that. It's not, your team might have a really different culture because your organization's so big. I can see how that would totally be the case.
Yeah, we have the overall agency culture that we remind each other of, but then each team has created their own culture.
Yeah.
Which I feel like has made the organization even stronger.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Terrence, what'd you do?
For us, we did team building events
virtually?
In the midst of no, in person. Yeah. Because in order for us, we were a team of like 5. Like I said, 4 to 5 people. So we had to come to the office because we were all essential.
We're all essential.
We were all essential because we had work to do, and we had not worked long enough with each other to be able to break and do the virtual thing and distributing $1.5 million.
Yeah.
It was not there. And at first I got a little bit of pushback of, I don't want to come back to work. I don't feel safe. But after a while, it was like, well, it now makes sense to me why we had to be here, because the information for the grant and the processes were literally being iterated in real time. of, hey, here,
Sure.
don't say this, say this, or let's use this script over here. Well, this is working better over here, to where we were able to iterate in real time. And so, because we had a staff of 5, we did team building events. We went to lunch, we brought lunch in, and we just really found ways for people to really show our humanity. So like little post-it notes, little cards, you're doing
I like
well,
it.
and we also, like, we did like a disc assessment to find out what people actually liked. We took the language appreciation quiz to find out who likes, affirmation, who needs a high five, who needs a
That's good.
gift. We highlighted people on their birthday, on their work anniversary. We really started to develop that culture, because again, my job as the organization is to think about, as the lead of the organization, my number one customer, so to speak, is actually my employees. And so if I can take care of my staff can do the right thing by taking care of the community that I serve. And so in order to see my vision actually go out into the community, I actually have to empower them to know that you are doing a great job. And then how do you like to be treated? And then treat people accordingly. And so, like
Yeah.
Angela said, celebrating the small things. Hey, we got $100,000 out this week. Hey,
Yeah.
and then we also started this whole process of what's called weekly wins. And it is the funniest thing ever, to where every week at 4 o'clock, we meet and huddle virtually or in person to celebrate 3 things that we won that week. And then
What do you call it?
weekly
Celebrate the
wins,
wins. Weekly wins. I
weekly
like
wins.
it.
So what are your 3 wins of this week? And everyone's able to build that positive motivation as a group. And then at the staff meeting, we have what's called shout outs, where everyone can shout out one cool thing that somebody else did. And the person that gets the most shout outs is our actually monthly MVP, and they get a gift card to a store.
Oh,
And
I
so
love that.
simple things of how do you
Yeah.
just celebrate people for who they are, as
Mhm.
opposed to all the other bad stuff that's out there, because y'all, the world is full of bad stuff. But I promise you, if you are able to take the time to get around people that actually want to succeed, and that want to see you succeed, which means that everyone succeeds together, that's really the epitome of what teamwork and dream work is really about.
I think, you're both of you are in such a different situation than I was as a leader, because we aren't direct service, we're an infrastructure organization. So we sort of had the opposite. We were all essential, but we could all go home and work, right? So it wasn't like being essential meant you had to show up every day. So we had more of the alienation issue, feeling lonely and disconnected. And we did a lot of virtual stuff. We sent some care packages, but we also took time to just have space to talk about that, to be really honest with each other about what we were feeling. And as the George Floyd incident happened, as things were happening that were taking our whole society down these rabbit holes, the elections, things like that, we tried to just make space to be really honest with each other about that. And I think, like any relationships, we are coming out of it, stronger. We know each other better. And I think our team it was bonding in a way, I would say. I think we've all had some of that in our lives from the pandemic. But even though we weren't direct service providers, we supported each other through it. And so I think that's really team building in itself. Jean, do we have any other questions? Are you ready for my one last question?
No, it looks like we have a few questions that come in. And I'm going to ask Jessica Ritter if she wants to unmute and ask her question.
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for all of this. This has been really, really awesome. I've been taking a lot of notes. I was kind of wondering if you had any broad advice for nonprofits who are still struggling with finances, staff, et cetera. I feel like we're probably going to be feeling the impact of COVID for a number of years. And so I'm just, general overarching advice or strategies to help dig out of that.
It's the long game, right? It's not a short game. So I think for me, I would say don't give up. There's more coming. There's lots of advocacy work going on at the national stage to keep some of these care supports in place for nonprofits, because our hard work is going to be over the next 5 to 10 years as we recover. So I think there's great things coming down the line, but yes. What about you two?
I feel like one of the most important things to do is go find someone in your community who was successful and
That's good.
partner with them, pick their brain, set up regular coffee dates with them. And because if they are successful, they will not be afraid to share that success outward and would be happy to. And as far as lack of staffing, that is one thing that we're still struggling with. It's eventually people will want to come back to work, or the world will be run by teenagers. It's my theory.
I have 2 teenagers, so please no, don't let that happen. Yeah, the workforce issue is only going to get worse before it gets better. I agree with you on that. But there's good things happening at the national level on that as well. Terrence, what's your long game?
What I would say is think about how you can reimagine your work. If your budget has, become slim and trim, it's okay to make those adjustments. What's not okay is that the agency overall goes out of business over the long haul because you were trying to keep up with something, because I've also seen that too of businesses in general, because I believe nonprofit is a business that are living beyond their means. Not saying that that's the situation here, but really thinking about how can you leverage interns? How can you recruit volunteers to add capacity? Rethinking your fundraising plan. If your organization is financed heavily by special events, there it is, folks.
Yeah.
You can't have a gala, you can't have a golf tournament. So thinking about, but how can you still raise money in this environment? Have you ever applied to a foundation to get grants? Are you a part of, those conversations with your local community foundation? What companies are in your area that can lend you volunteers to help you update your website, your brochures, skill-based volunteering? Taproot, I think it's called the Taproot Foundation, Susan. Taproot is a volunteer organization. Skill volunteer. So think about how you can get stuff for free. There's always willing to bargain and to do that. Again, high schoolers need college service hours. And so begin thinking about how do you create value and whose problem are you solving?
Yeah,
Put your nonprofit at the center, and then think about all the community pieces around that, from students at the high school level, students at the university level, skill-based volunteering at the professional level, looking at your, starting those conversations with your local community foundation, looking at, leaderosity and, networking on LinkedIn to say, hey, our nonprofit can really use help with XYZ, building a charity wish list on Amazon and promoting it. All kinds of companies have different kind of philanthropic arms to where, you check out at Walgreens or the local grocery store, they may give you 10 cents on every blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's a million and one ways to raise money. But again, thinking and being super intentional with limited resources and relying on your boards. They are there. They have to be engaged with all of these processes and things, ideas that come up in, through the staff role, to really look at how do they leverage their networks to call on their peers. There's a whole movement around, birthdays on Facebook. People are bringing in $500, $1,000, $2,000 on Facebook birthdays. Hey, for my birthday, I'm supporting my favorite charity. Would you please join me for this? Looking at,
let me pause you, because you could go forever, because I know you. You do generate a lot of great ideas, but we're getting close on time. So let me lift up a couple of things. I think Angela's suggestion to meet with people who are successful in your network is great, because they're going to generate a lot of the ideas that Terrence is sharing, just a stream of, here's what we're doing and how you can do that. But I also think what Terrence shared is really important. Sometimes, against our gut, we have to stop doing things that we know people need for us to do. And if you don't have the people and the resources to do it, it's really hard to do. It is hard to close the homeless shelter for a day because we don't have anybody to staff it. But that's a reality that the nonprofit sector is facing. And so, stopping doing a whole program and focusing resources where you can be the most impactful may be the best path forward. It's really hard to do. Well, I loved talking with you both. You've inspired me for sure. Now, quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, but my last question is, despite all of the negatives that we talked about, what are you most optimistic about going forward from what we've learned and the place where we are now and what's next?
We are no longer stuck in a box. We thought we had to do what we do a particular way, and we learned we didn't. Our big annual fundraiser still went on. We just did it a little bit different. This year we'll be back to our normal way, but we learned that we can still serve children and families regardless of what's thrown at us.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you would have thought Porter Leith was totally place-based if you had looked at their services before this. So that's a great learning. What about you, Terrence?
For me, the biggest takeaway was that the pandemic had a purpose. And that was to shake up everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the people that we serve, to really reimagine and think differently and believe differently, dream differently, and to lead with our heart and to rely on our community to come to it, to help itself. And it's our job just to kind of mobilize that power.
And I would say for me, I'm most optimistic about this idea that people are really soul searching about their careers and what's most important to them. And I hope that the Great Resignation will lead to sector shifting that we need to really infuse talent and bodies into the sector. So that's my point of optimism. Well, I cannot thank you two enough. You're that was so fabulous, and just what I hope the conversation we could have. And I can't thank all of you enough either for being with us as part of Elevate. The end of this presentation is actually the end of our 3-day conference. And I personally have felt an energy that I didn't know was possible in a virtual conference. You have all showed up and engaged, and my tank is full to go into next week and just get back to the work of the sector. So thank all of you. Your willingness to learn with us and to share your own experiences has made us all better for it. And we're grateful to this community that we've built in the last days. We look forward to working with you in the future. We hope we'll see you at some of our other events. And then my big charge is just to go out and make the world better, because you are our change agents. You are a face in the community, and we appreciate every single one of you. So have a great weekend. Friday can start. Water drinking can start anytime now because Elevate's over, okay? Good luck to you all. Have a great weekend.